Alright, you guys said it. You all said that Super Mario Bros. 3 is one of the best Mario games ever made, and arguably the most technically innovative entry in the entire series, laying the groundwork for future Mario games, so of course your boy had to get around to playing it for myself to see if that was indeed true. Well, first of all, I have a question for you Glazy Guardians. Are you in like a secret group chat or Discord server where you all strategically plan what games you're going to recommend to me based off of what I've already been surprised by? I say that because in basically every video that I upload within the Regress series, I express that I was in some way surprised by how good the game is, whether it's innovation, graphics, gameplay, or the game as a whole. And I really didn't think I would go back to an NES game and somehow yet again be shocked by just how good it was, especially on the NES, because as much as that system has earned my respect during the journey so far, there is only so much you can do with that limited hardware, right? Well, here we are sitting here like the little idiot I am with my brain melted yet again, because Super Mario Bros. 3 is an absolute retro f***ing phenom. Hey there all you beautiful guardians of the glaze. Welcome back to the Milky Donut. If you're new here, this is the Milky Donut. We do all things video games, movies, and pop culture. And if you're not new here, you're looking a little extra jacked today. Keep that up. Well, before we yet again jump back into our video game time travel machine, as always, I would like to mention that I do have a goal of reaching 10,000 subscribers as quickly as I can. So if you could go ahead and like this video, leave the glaziest of comments, hype it if you can, and subscribe if you think it's worthy of the algorithm. As always, shout out to the subscriber of the week, Mr. Atari Tom, and feel free to run this video up because you could very well be the next MVP. Any artists out there, stick around to the end of the video to hear about my brand new avatar contest where your very own design could end up replacing my AI slop avatar, as iconic as I think it is, and forever be part of the Milky Donut channel. And with all that nonsense out of the way, let's jump back into our video game time travel machine and play Super Mario Bros. 3 for the NES. Before we jump into why I think this game just might be not only one of the best Mario games I've ever played, but also just might be my favorite NES game that I've played in this series so far, I do have to give you a little bit of Milky lore when it comes to Mario so you can get an understanding of my history with the series and where I stood as of right before playing Super Mario Bros. 3. The Mario series holds a pretty special place in my heart. When I was little and playing Ocarina of Time on my grandparents' Nintendo 64, which is sitting in my game room right now, Mario 64 was the game that I played when I got stuck, frustrated, and needed a break. However, I never beat it, to be honest, and I don't even know how far I really ever got. It was also the first Mario game I ever played. I used to draw Mario characters all the time, I had Mario merch, and I considered myself to be a pretty big fan. But the Mario series was always in the shadow of the Legend of Zelda series for me. When I was little, Mario was the game that I played when I wasn't playing Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Banjo-Kazooie, or this fever dream of a game, which I'll probably at some point in this series make a video about because I really want to go back to it and see what I was actually playing. But other than Mario 64, the only other Mario games I've ever fully played through were New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which I loved, Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, which I loved even more, and I'd say I got about 90% of the way through Mario Odyssey, which again I loved. So I'm very excited to play the legendary Mario games that I've yet to experience. I'm having so much fun doing this with all of you guys, man. You guys are making it so much fun. You really have no idea. Well, there are certain games in history that develop such a massive reputation that you start to wonder if they can ever even live up to the hype, especially with the way you guys in the comments glaze all these games. For as long as I can remember, I've always heard of Super Mario Bros. 3. When you guys recommended it to me and I started my research, which I always do of course, as soon as I saw the bright yellow background, blue font, and Mario in that iconic Tanuki suit, I was like, oh yeah, okay, yep, I've seen this 1,000 times. Well, on today's episode of Milky Embarrasses Himself and Makes Him Look Like the Idiot He Is, I didn't know this was an NES game until now. I've always thought it was a Game Boy Advance game because I guess that was the only one I ever knew of was the Game Boy Advance version. Now, I don't know the differences or how they compare, but I didn't look much into it because I wanted to go into this completely blind, which is what a lot of you guys said to do. The first thing that really stood out to me wasn't even one specific mechanic. It was how unbelievably polished everything felt and even looked. By this point in the series, I've played enough older games to know that some of the games from the NES era can be slightly rough around the edges. But Super Mario Bros. 3 feels like the complete opposite of all of that. It really felt like the developers looked 30 years into the future, looked at one of their future Mario games and said, yeah, we can just do that now. It feels like Nintendo had already mastered game design and was simply showing off what they were capable of. Mario controls almost perfectly. There's weight to his movement, momentum when you run, which you know I love after playing Donkey Kong Country, and a level of precision that immediately makes platforming feel next level crispy. The sheer amount of content packed into this game, it's actually absurd. This game really shows that Nintendo somehow making games that shouldn't run on the hardware they're made for is nothing new. And the somewhat random order that I'm playing your recommendations in is kind of working out perfectly because I keep getting whiplash from my expectations being inverted so violently. Because I'll play an NES game like Blaster Master, which is great, and then I'll go straight into a PS1 game like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and I'm like, man, this is phenomenal, and I can kind of compare the differences when it comes to the generations. Then I'll go back to playing an NES game like Super Mario Bros. 3 and think to myself, well, I've already played a couple NES games, so I kind of know what I'm getting into and what to expect. Hell no. Every single time I think I'm starting to get a feel for what to expect, it's like you guys are like, nope, you've seen nothing yet, Milky. Going into it, I expected a fairly straightforward platformer similar to the original Super Mario Bros., which I know is ignorant of me, I should know better by now, but I mean, Mario, at the very concept, is pretty simple, so I didn't think that an old Mario game would blow my mind, but here we are. Yet again. Instead, what I found was a game that feels absolutely enormous for the hardware it was running on. In typical Mario fashion, there are 8 distinct worlds, each with its own identity, hidden secrets scattered everywhere, minigames, item houses, fortresses, airship battles, alternate routes, warp whistles, and so much variety that the game manages to feel completely fresh all the way through. Yeah, if you've never heard of this game and then I described it to you with just those last couple of sentences and then told you it was an NES game, I feel like anybody would be like, oh, what? But what impressed me even more so, yet again, is how revolutionary the actual world map structure must have felt at the time. Prior to this, platformers were generally very straightforward. You beat one stage and simply move on to the next. But here, Nintendo suddenly introduced something that made progression feel much more like an actual journey. The overworld wasn't just a menu, it gives you agency. You could choose branching pathways, discover hidden shortcuts, strategically use items, avoid certain encounters, and approach progression with far more freedom than most games were allowing at the time. Looking back at it now, it feels familiar because so many games copied this structure later on, but at the time this had to feel incredibly innovative. And I think that's something modern players like myself can easily overlook. Looking at Mario Bros. 3 today, it's easy to judge it against games that came years later. Even I at first found myself thinking, yeah, this definitely feels like Mario games that I've played, which is a great thing. But then I'd stop and think, wait, this is the Mario game, the one that all the Mario games I'm thinking of came from. I'd think about what the average NES game looked like during that era, especially the ones that I played during this series, and it becomes much easier to understand why people were blown away by this. Compared to most games on the system, as I said, Mario 3 feels absurdly ambitious, and one of the biggest reasons for that is how much creativity Nintendo packed into the level design alone. I naively originally assumed that a lot of the levels would start blending together similar to something like Metroid, but with a different aesthetic. But that moment never came. Pretty much every stage introduces something new and exciting. Some levels revolve around vertical platforming while others focus on speed. One thing I really appreciated was how Mario 3 constantly shifts the pace in ways that I wasn't expecting. Yeah, kinda like everything else that I wasn't expecting there, buddy. Certain stages suddenly introduce auto-scrolling sections, and what I found interesting is how something so seemingly simple dramatically changes the feel of gameplay. Especially if you're like me and you go into this game completely blind knowing absolutely nothing. Up until the point of Mario 3's release, Mario had always felt like a game where you controlled the rhythm and momentum of gameplay entirely. But here, Nintendo forces you to adapt to the game's pacing instead. Suddenly, you have less time to react, less time to plan jumps, and the entire experience becomes much more tense. It sounds simple, I know, but it adds yet another layer of variety that helps the game constantly feel fresh. Desert levels introduce quicksand and completely different types of hazards. It's crazy to think about how many elements, that of which are so familiar and are staples of the series, were started right here. Apparently, this is the first entry in the series where piranha plants shoot fireballs at you, which is something I expected because I've seen it in the later games, but I can only imagine if you played this game upon release, that was a big oh shit moment. Another example is how Giant Land completely changes your perspective by turning familiar enemies and objects into oversized obstacles. Even small environmental changes constantly make each world feel distinct from one another and different, which is one thing I really didn't think this game would pull off. Idiot Milky take per usual. I was just so thrown off by how, quote, modern Mario the design philosophy really does feel. But we can't talk about Super Mario Bros. 3 without talking about the power-ups, which might honestly be one of the biggest contributing factors to this game's GOAT status. For the most part, the original Mario game gave players pretty limited options, both from what I remember and what I read during my research for this video. You could grow a little bigger and throw some fireballs, but that was about it. Mario 3 feels like Nintendo suddenly decided to remove every restriction and say, "More!" The Super Leaf allows you to fly. Yes, fly in an NES game, and not crappy fly either, like good fly. And just that one addition alone completely changes how you, my beautiful guardian of the glaze, interact with the levels. Suddenly, platforming isn't just about moving left and right. I started to look upward, trying to figure out what areas I could skip, what secrets are hidden above, and how movement itself can become part of the strategy. Then Nintendo somehow adds even more for you to indulge in, like a sweet cream-filled donut. The frog suit changes underwater movement entirely, and I didn't even know that there were more than one suit in this game. I thought it was just the one on the cover. The iconic Tanuki suit adds another unique mechanic altogether. What makes all these power-ups so impressive is how Nintendo built an entire layer of strategy around them outside of the levels themselves. Being able to actually store items on the overworld map and choose exactly what you wanted to use adds a huge amount of planning and depth to the experience, something that's familiar now, but was brand new and breathtaking at the time. Instead of simply reacting to whatever power-up you happen to find inside a level, the game lets you prepare for future challenges ahead of time. Again, sound familiar? Yeah, well, this is the genesis of all of it. It's one of those design choices that feels incredibly modern, especially for a game, again, running on the NES. And I know you guys are probably sick of me saying for an NES, but I feel like the only way to give this game the proper respect it deserves is to show you just how much it accomplished on that hardware. Let's go back to the suit upgrades for a second if you don't mind. What impressed me was that these aren't just cosmetic additions. Nintendo could have easily just made these nothing more than a change of aesthetic with maybe one simple mechanical change. But they didn't. Each one really does fundamentally change the way you approach different parts of the game, and on top of that adds aesthetic diversity. Another thing that I found myself appreciating more and more as I kept playing was just how technically impressive it feels, again, for the NES. It's the first NES title that I played where I completely forgot that I was playing an NES game. Usually with a lot of the other titles that I played from this era, as groundbreaking and as great as they were, there was always something that would happen that would make me think, oh yeah, this game is 30 plus years old after all. But not here, not with Super Mario Bros. 3. The visuals are incredibly clean and colorful, with smooth animations, and there's so much personality packed into every single screen. Even the smallest of design improvements shine bright here. Jumping back to the beginning of my journey, right off the bat, I immediately noticed how much more, I guess I would say fair, the game feels compared to earlier Mario titles. Although I haven't played really any except for the original, and I didn't even play that one very much, I do know enough to know that in previous games, taking damage after collecting stronger power-ups could instantly knock you all the way back down to small Mario. Here, Nintendo adds an extra layer of forgiveness by allowing you to downgrade one step at a time. It may seem minor, but changes like that do make the progression feel much less punishing while still preserving the challenge. And it just goes to show how refined Nintendo's game design philosophy had already become. Even the soundtrack deserves more credit than I initially expected to give it, because at first it seemed fairly simple, but the more I played and the more I listened, the more I noticed just how much variety there actually is. With all the different world themes, map themes, fortress music, boss music, bonus areas, and hidden zones, there's way more variety here than I thought there would be. But then there's something harder to explain, that I'm sure a lot of you can understand. And that's the sense of wonder that this game creates inside of you. The first time I found hidden shortcuts or stumbled into a secret area, I realized this wasn't just a straightforward, run-of-the-mill platformer. Nintendo wanted players to always prioritize experimenting. They wanted curiosity to be rewarded. I found myself appreciating how much larger the overall conflict feels compared to earlier Mario games. Similar to later entries in the series, Bowser doesn't simply feel like the final obstacle just waiting for you at the end of the adventure. All throughout the game, it constantly reinforces the idea that you are working your way through an entire army. The fortresses, airships, and the Koopalings all commanding their own encounters. All of it makes Bowser feel like less of a singular boss fight and more like a genuine threat that's looming over an entire world. It adds scale to the adventure in a way that I really wasn't expecting. But I think what ultimately makes Super Mario Bros. 3 so respected decades later is that it represents one of those rare moments where the developers completely understood what they were capable of. Every mechanic feels so influential and groundbreaking for their time. Every level feels well thought out and handcrafted. Every new idea elegantly builds on what came before it. Perhaps the biggest compliment I can give it is this one simple statement. Despite being an NES game from the late 80s, it never once felt dated. It sounds simple, but I think that says everything. It's easy to play this game now and say, yeah, it's a really good Mario game that's in line with the others, but you have to remember that those other Mario games are good because of this one. I think that's what makes Super Mario Bros. 3 feel so historically important. This game didn't simply influence future Mario titles, it helped establish the entire blueprint that platformers would follow for years afterward. The idea of themed worlds with constantly evolving mechanics and branching progression pathways to change up progression, movement-based power progression, environmental variety, rewarding exploration, and constantly introducing new ideas without overstaying their welcome, all of that became foundational design philosophy for countless platformers that followed. Looking back now, it becomes pretty obvious that Nintendo wasn't just making another Mario game here. They were quietly establishing a formula that the entire genre would borrow from for decades. A lot of classic games are remembered because they are historically important, but when you think about how massive the Mario brand is with the movies and games and billions of dollars worth of sales, it's crazy to think that most of that started right here. Some of the older games that were influential were ones that you can respect without necessarily enjoying them. Super Mario Bros. 3 does not fall into that category in the slightest. It still feels genuinely enjoyable to play decades later, which tells me its reputation was never built purely on nostalgia, luck, or overly excessive hype. People call this one of the greatest Mario games ever made because it pushed the NES further than most thought possible. It is one of the best Mario games that I've ever played. This is the Super Metroid of Mario games for me. You all called it one of the best platformers ever, and you were again right. And people like you still come back to it year after year because underneath all of that praise, history, and consistently being called the GOAT, it's simply an incredibly fun game. After finally experiencing it for myself, I understand why so many people still look at Super Mario Bros. 3 as one of the greatest games of all time. And with that, we come to the end of our time travel journey. As always, I had an absolute blast with playing Mario 3, and it somehow exceeded my expectations exponentially. But do you prefer old games or new games? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see more of this, feel free to drop what you'd like to see next in the comments, and don't be afraid to write repeat comments that you've already recommended to me. It only increases the chance that I'll play it sooner rather than later. I'm also holding an artist competition. The iconic slop avatar's grave is being dug. There have been lots of comments from people saying they would draw or design me one, and I'm tired of hearing about the AI avatar. I made it like 4 years ago when generative AI was still new and fun, so I've just used it since then. And for some reason, yes, I get AI is slop, I 100% agree, and I want a good one, like a real artist one, but for some reason people see that and think that my videos are AI, which I mean, I really don't understand. I feel like I'm pretty obviously a human, but if you want to change it, make me one and email it to officialmilkydonut@gmail.com. I'll feature all of them in a video if I get a few, and we can vote on a winner together. If your design wins, your mark will forever be left on the Milky Donut brand and in videos. Credit will also be given in the description of every video that features the avatar. You can check the comments below for the rules of the competition. As always, don't forget to like, comment, hype, and subscribe to become a guardian of the glaze, and I'll see you next time on the Milky Donut.